That's our Steve. Good evening, Tony Dotson, alcoholic. It's an honor and a privilege to be here, and I truly mean that. It's an honor to be asked to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, but certainly when your dear friends entrust you to their home group enough that you can come and share your experience, strength, and hope at their home group, they must think a little something of you. And I do hold this group in high esteem for a number of reasons, but I always enjoy coming back. I usually get to make it here about once a year and get to come see everybody, and I love to see the familiar faces, some old friends and new friends, and thank you, Beth, for the prayer before I got up here. That always helps keep me in line. Yeah. Kind of get this thing going. My sobriety date is June the 13th, 1987. My home group is the Willow Springs 12-step group that now meets in Fuquay, North Carolina. We meet at 402 North Main Street at the First United Methodist Church. There's a meeting there going to start in about 50 minutes. Our Thursday night open speaker meeting starts at 8, from 8 to 9. Sunday nights, we have two meetings on Sunday nights. One is a beginner's meeting from 6 to 7. Have about a 15-minute break, and then from 7:15 to 8:15 is our literature study. We study one or more of the 12 steps or one of the chapters in the Big Book, and the first Sunday of every month at the second meeting, we study the tradition corresponding with that month. Because we have found and do believe that a good three legacy group would be not so much one if it didn't study the traditions and adhere to those. And I can tell you I'm extremely grateful for having a home group that does that. And it certainly helps me as a home group member to not only stay focused, but to keep that primary purpose clear in mind is what we're really all here for tonight. And I appreciate everyone that set up the meeting and all the goodies. And, you know, it takes a lot to bring a meeting together. People just walk in at the last minute sometimes and sit down and it's all done like magic, you know, but there's a lot of preparation. Business meetings to decide who's going to chair, who's going to set up, who's going to clean up. You know, groups are one of those things that runs like a well-oiled machine in AA, and I've always been impressed with that. So a good home group's just hard to come by. If you have a good home group, this is yours and you love it, then treat it that way. But I'm supposed to tell you in a general way what I used to be like, what happened and what I'm like now. And I can tell you I'm not up here by accident. I'm not a paid public speaker, as some of them say. I'm just one alcoholic who had the good fortune to get sober and had the good fortune of sponsorship that took me through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, through the program of action, and to allow me to have that spiritual experience that allowed me to stay sober a day at a time since that time. And for that, I'm truly grateful. I started drinking at a relatively young age, as most would think. From my recollection, my first drink was around the age of 7. Now my daughter's 10, and that just terrified me when she was 7. Now she's 10 now and drink-free so far, so we'll keep hoping, because she's going to be one of those little instant. I can see her personality's a lot like her dad's, and I'm like, oh girl, you need to not drink. You're going to pop like a little popcorn kernel and just boom, instant alcoholic, you know. So it's that personality trait, just watching that. But I took that first drink at my uncle's house, and it was one of those things to where that I grew up in a home where there were more women than men, so every time I got a chance to escape to my uncle's house and watch football and hang out with my cousin who was named Buckshot. His real name was Jimmy Dale, but we nicknamed him Buckshot. So I got to go hang with these guys and watch football on Sunday afternoon and eat popcorn, and my cousin and I would fight over who was going to get the jelly glass and who was going to get the Pepsi bottle, but we both wanted the bottle, by the way. I don't know what our fixation with bottles is, but it does seem to be there. So our fighting was kind of settled when my uncle set up ice-cold Pabst Blue Ribbon beer on the coffee table with salt around the top of it, and immediately he picks it up and takes a pull, and it just looked like it was the best thing ever, and we started just hammering on him to get him to let us have a sip of that, and we finally beat him into submission, and he caved and gave us a sip, and my cousin took a little pull and handed it right back, and I took a nice pull and got as much as my mouth would hold as he was trying to take the can away from me. I got as much in as I could without him removing the beer from me. And all I can tell you is that it went in and it went down, and I immediately burped really loud, and it was crisp and it was clean and it was refreshing. and I immediately wanted another swallow of that Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, God, that wasn't my experience at all with a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. but that PBR tasted mighty good to me that day. And I don't know if it was the environment, the hanging with the men, the larger-than-life personalities, or just the fact that I just really enjoyed the way that thing tasted. It wasn't sweet and syrupy like that Pepsi. It was crisp and clean, and from that moment on, I can tell you is that if there was an unattended beer, it was not safe around me because I would help myself. And if you sent me to the refrigerator or the cooler to get you a beer, and I could get it open without breaking the ring off the top, the little pull tabs, and if I could get that thing open before you got it, I was going to get some in that too, and I call that paying the beer tax. If I get there, if I got to go get you one, I'm going to get some before you get it, if I can get it open. But that was just the way that it began for me, and I grew up in a normal household, a blue-collar family, and good family. I just was one of those kids that was smaller than the other kids. I had red hair and freckles. I had a head full of curly hair. And I kind of looked like Jody on Family Affair for y'all that might be my age or somewhere along there. And so I got along with the wrong attention. You learned how to fight at the bus stop, on the bus stop, off the bus stop, in the playground, on the playground. You got pretty good at fighting, but I can tell you is I felt different. And I don't know why I felt different. I just felt different. And I always felt like that. And it's when I became a teenager, we're kind of all awkward as a teenager, but I can remember outgrowing that awkwardness and really getting my feet under me there for a while until you about hit puberty and we moved and I kind of felt at odds. I wasn't in that little village I grew up in. We were in a new neighborhood, new kids, and I kind of felt out of sorts. But I can remember the first time that alcohol worked for me was camping out with these guys in this new neighborhood in the springtime and really having accessibility to as much beer as I wanted. And I had never had that before. Usually I was confined to a half a beer, a couple of sips. But here we are, we had a whole cooler full of beer. And we started drinking on these things. It didn't matter what brand was in there. They were beer to us. And I had the chance to drink as much as I could. And all I remember is I was having a really good time. And then I woke up extremely cold, wet, and just terrified as to what had happened and how I got wet. And I woke up all my buddies that were camping out with me, accusing them of throwing me in the creek. And they began to, and they were amused doing this, they began to tell me about all the things I did, obviously while I was not conscious, because I remembered none of it. And so the first time I really get to drink as much as I want, I go into this blackout, and I just made a fool out of myself. They enjoyed it, obviously, because they laughed about it for weeks, but it wasn't much fun to me. But I can tell you, that even as odd as I felt, being wet and cold and somewhat humiliated and embarrassed, the next day, I thought, that's a pretty good time. I can't wait to do that again. Now, I tell you, most normal folks aren't going to think that way at all. They would have probably stayed away from it like rattlesnake juice or something. But I can tell you is that at every opportunity I had to drink, it seemed like that's what we did. And I can tell you that I had some good times drinking. I mean, it wasn't all bad times, but I didn't get in trouble every time I drank, but every time I got in trouble, I was drinking. Does that make sense to you? And what I mean by that was I was 16 years old, had my license about a month now, and we were out riding around. I had an old 68 Ford Falcon, 3-speed on the column, 4-door, and it was not a race car. It was an old 6-cylinder, but I can tell you is that I loved that old car, and my buddies did too, and we would pile in this thing and ride around my hometown. And I grew up down in eastern North Carolina, so I grew up down in Plymouth, and we had one of those nor'easters blow in about the end of January when my birthday is, and it started to snow that night. And we're out riding around in this old car, and the way the deal was, and y'all might have had this same agreement with your girlfriends or boyfriends, it was all buddies hanging out with drinking, is that whatever you do, there's somebody going to have to bring something to the party. So somebody would bring cigarettes, somebody would bring beer, whatever they could swipe from their parents, and we would combine our resources and go out and have a good time. And we had combined our resources that night and started out with beer and cigarettes, but we were running low. My buddy of mine wanted to go by the grocery store and get some more cigarettes, so we pull up there to let him out. He goes in, and we're all got a pretty good buzz on. I got a good thick tongue buzz going on from all the beer we've been drinking and smoking them Cool Filter Kings, and we're doing good. And he goes in the store, and the carload of girls pull up, and we're talking between the windows, and we're all excited about the snow, and we're chatting and talking as teenagers do, and he dives in the back seat, pounding on the seat, saying, drive, 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 like some kind of getaway car at a bank robbery or something. And we tell the girls goodbye, and I pull off, and he's excited, and he opens this old army jacket, and you ought to believe the pockets on this thing, and he's pulling wine out of pockets. I didn't know that thing had so many pockets. He's pulling wine out, and I mean, it's the best screw cap wine. It's the Mogan David 2020. It's the Richards Wild Irish Rose, the Thunderbird. I mean, we've got some good stuff going here. And the cigarettes come out, and we begin to enjoy this wine, and we begin to enjoy those cigarettes and riding around. The snow's coming down heavier and heavier, and now, granted, I got 30 days of experience driving this car with the clutch, no power steering, no manual brakes. Everything's manual on this car, and so I'm driving, and the thick tongue's now going to the numb head. You know, it's kind of moves up, you know, and we're having a really good time by this point. And I'm driving down the road, and I turn the corner, and I change from up to second gear, and I knock my cigarette out on the dash, and it goes in the floorboard, and I can see the ember down there rolling back and forth, you know. So I'm turning the wheel and watching this, and I'm going to time it and fish it out of the floorboard and then get back on line, you know. And so I got this thing timed just right, and I go down, and I come up with that cigarette. And when I do, I got headlights coming right at me, and the horn's blowing, and we pull over, and we just barely miss the guy, and he runs down in the ditch, and my buddies erupt into laughter, and this car is just going crazy, and we're all laughing, and I mean hard laughing, you know. And about that time, this car's coming out of the ditch, and he cuts the blue light on, and back in them days, it's not a little strobe light. Now, I mean the bubblegum machine where everything lights up, looks like a disco, and with the reflection off the snow, everything's blue and it's sparkly, and at least it was to me after all that wine anyway. But I get so addled now, you know. I'm in a mess now. I'm so tore up. I can't even enjoy my buzz. I can't even drive. I'm getting flustered, and he's got that blue light, and I just pull over in the ditch on my side of the road, just stick it right in the ditch, and he comes up, and the car is sitting on an angle, and I'm trying to get out, and because I need to get out by now, because I can feel that alcohol is getting ready. I was a puker. I'm sorry. I was one of those guys that I just was, and I had way too much of the wrong mixture, and I really need to get out of that car and go let go of that stuff. And that cop come up there, and he's got the big hat and the big revolver and the radio and the blackjack and the handcuffs. It looks like Batman's utility belt or something, you know, and these starch creased pants and the black patent leather shoes that you can see yourself in. And I opened that door, and he'd close it, and I'd open, he'd close it, and I'd open, he'd close it. And we did this 2 or 3 times, and he's wanting license and registration, and I did follow my mother's directions. I bought one of those things that goes on your visor that you keep your license and registration in. Wasn't that good? It was, because all I had to do was pull it down and hand it to him. That satisfied him. He moved out of the way, and I got out of the car, because I knew that if I threw up on those pretty shoes, he'd have beat me to death with that big blackjack. So I got out of the car and got over in the bush, and I started letting that wine go, and he started collecting all my buddies, and he had them all over there, and he's a big old guy. And Mr. Mazzell was just huge. He was big, period. He's really big to us guys. And we're looking, and he's looking there, and they're all looking up at him like this. And they're just nodding, and I'm looking over there, and I'm getting sick, and I'm looking over there, and I'm going, God, I got to get over there. Something's just not good. I'm going to die. I'm going to jail tonight. My dad's going to kill me. He's not going to come get me, because he always told me, if you go to jail, I'm not coming to get you. So I'm thinking life is over as I know it at 16. No license, no car, it's just over. And I get over there, and he scares the bejeebies out of me. For God, it seemed like an hour. I'm sure it was only a few minutes, but after he scares us all half to death, he comes up with this deal that one of the guys in the car, believe it or not, wasn't drinking. Now, to this day, I've not figured that one out, but he was not drinking. He must have been thumbing and pretending something. I'm glad he was, because he said, Mr. Dotson, if you will let this young man drive your car home and take you boys home tonight, I'll let you boys go home tonight. But I don't want to see you on the road anymore tonight. I'd have gave him that car just to let me get out of there and not go to jail. Of course, I'd let him drive me home, you know. So we do the deal and we go home, and that was my first grade. Now the other times I got after that, they didn't turn out that way. I had trouble with responsibility. I don't know about y'all, but I had trouble with responsibility. I'm a big daydreamer. And I was sitting in high school down on that river in North Carolina, and all I could think about was hunting and fishing and girls and racing cars and going swimming and who was where doing what. And biology was the furthest thing from my mind that morning. And I'm just thinking, I just got to get out of here, you know. I know I'm missing something somewhere, and I probably didn't think like that, but I did. And that just kept me in trouble in high school. I mean, once I got my license, my grades just dive-bombed. And it showed my mother, even they threatened to take the car away and all that if I didn't pull my grades up. And I would do just enough to get by. But we sure did have a good time skipping school. And being around all that water, it's easy to get distracted, especially when that water temperature warms up enough where you don't turn blue anymore after you're swimming in it. And I was gone so much my junior year and senior year, I had to go to summer school to make up because I missed so many days. I remember one time, I'll tell you this story and I'll move on. This is one of them summer school stories, was I had missed so many classes and during the regular year that I had to go to summer school. And well, being that we had summer school in a neighboring county, Terrell County, did not have summer school. And so they were coming, a lot of the girls and guys, mostly girls, were coming to our high school to go to summer school. And so I was in there for English, and so was these girls from Terrell County. And one of them was named Candy. Now, if you're going to have any kids in the near future, don't name her Candy. That was a wild child. But we had a large time. But I'm going to school, and I'm meeting these girls, and everything's really good for summer school. About a half a day, I can do that. I can stay focused for a half a day. But it's all over once I get out of there now. But I pull up one morning, and I have all intentions of going to school that day. I have my books. I'm there early in the parking lot. I'm dressed. I'm prepared for school that day. And this station wagon pulls up, and there's probably 6 or 8 girls in there. And Candy's in the very back of that station wagon, and she holds up a whole case of beer and says, "We're going to the beach. How about you?" Well, of course I'm going to the beach. What would make you think I'm not, you know? And I bailed right in the back of that station wagon with Candy, and here we go off to the beach. Well, we made it. Believe it or not, that case of beer didn't last near as long as I thought it was going to. But you can do the math. There's that many people and drink like we drink. It doesn't take long. But anyway, we need to refreshen our stock. So we stopped. We made it to Crestville. And y'all know down east and know it's not very far from Plymouth to Crestville. We got sidetracked somewhere. And anyway, that case of beer went by the wayside. And we go to the little grocery store there in downtown Crestville to get some more beer. And we're all in the store, and we're having a large time. Them girls are really silly now, so we're really enjoying what we're doing. And they're coming down the aisle with this beer and all these chips and everything, and they're getting all the stuff for the beach, and we're just having a large time and laughing. And about that time, I see these girls just freeze. And now my back's to the front door, and they just throw the beer right into the grocery shelves. Anywhere to set it down, they just ran. All of them ran and split. And I'm thinking, man, what in the world? And I turn around, and in walks this guy who looks like Jackie Gleason from Smokey and the Bandit. It's the sheriff of Terrell County. Guess who Candy's daddy is? So I just grabbed me a magazine, and I started looking at it. And I'm watching him. He's chasing them around the store, and I let him get them all round up and get them out. And I'm thinking, it's not that bad a walk. I can walk back home. I'll be glad to walk back home. And about that time, I hear this man clear his throat behind me. And I turn around, and lo and behold, it was him. And he said, "I think you need to come with me." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I went to get back into the station wagon. I rode there. He said, "Oh, no. You get to ride with me." Well, that was a long 15, 20-minute ride between Crestville and Plymouth that day. And when I got back to high school, my parents there, all of our parents, it was just one of those things. I mean, that's just how my brain worked. I would make a bad decision over a good one every time. And that's just kind of how I went. And you add some drink into that and a good fun spirit. And man, boy, I had a large time, but it was just always trouble sometime down the road. And alcohol started to turn on me early on. The big book talks about, in the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth talked about the phenomenon of craving and that mental blank spot, that strange mental blank spot that happens preceding that first drink. And he talked about that even though we have a date, an appointment on a date that's favorable to us, that inevitably we would take a drink a day or so before that important appointment and we wouldn't be able to keep it. Now, I prepared for a high school dance. I had a date, pretty little girl. I had everything lined up. I had my boys lined up. We had our juice lined up. We were over at the old Boy Scout hut. We were all old Scouts, so we went to the Boy Scout hut, which was right behind the tennis courts at the high school, and we were getting juiced up to go to this big dance at the high school. I had a vest on. If y'all know the 70s, I had my John Travolta vest on, my zip-up boots with the white stripe down and the suit, and I was ready to go dance. And I had a date and I had everything prepared. I was looking for a good time that evening. We started with the juice. We were having a large time out there in the car. And the next thing I know, I wake up in the car and the high school is dark. And I'm all alone in my car. And I have no idea how time it is, but I know it's not good. And I'm trying to find out. I look to see what time it is. And my curfew was 10 o'clock back then, and it's about 1 a.m. now. So I'm in a lot of trouble. And you see, that's just how drinking did me. Is one time I'd have a really good time, and then the next time I'd have one of those blackouts or something would happen, and I would miss what I had really looked forward to doing. And I just didn't feel I could do it without alcohol and have a good time. I always thought that I'll take that 50-50 chance. It's going to be one of them times where I can have a good time and enhance the moment rather than go and not drink and be miserable the whole time and say, boy, I wish I'd have got something to drink, you know. And that's kind of the way my drinking went back and forth. The first time I got in serious trouble with the law, I had moved to Greenville, graduated high school. Somehow I think they just got rid of me. Just get him out of here. And anyway, I was going to community college because I didn't have the aptitude or the study habits or the desire to go to a four-year university, so I didn't prepare anything for college. As soon as I could change my college prep classes to general or basic, just enough where all I just breeze through, I go to class, take the test, and get a grade, I was fine with that. I lost all ambition from drinking. I had no ambition except to party and to have a good time. I thought that's what life was all about. And so I breezed through high school, much to my demise, and I was going to community college. I decided like 2 weeks before graduation, the guidance counselor calls me in the office before graduation and says, Tony, what are your plans? I'm going to go over here and get a job at the mill and go to work and build a big house on the river, you know, like everybody else. And she said, well, don't you think you need a skill set? You know, they're not really hiring over there. You know, you might want to consider going to school. So she talked me into going. So we applied to Pitt Community College because I didn't want to be at Martin. That's in Williamston, the next town over. I'd have to stay at home with mom and dad. And I didn't want any more of that parental domination. I was ready to get out of that. So Washington, I would have had to done the same thing. So I said, well, I'm going to Greenville. That's the furthest way, and that's a big party school. And I said, that'll be the place to go. Well, I went to Greenville. I drank my way in and my way out of Greenville in about a year and a half. And when I came out of there with 2 consecutive drunk driving tickets, one right behind the other one. But I got both of them in Plymouth because I came home on the weekend to show them how we drink in Greenville, you know. Crazy. And one of them I thought was going to be smart. The first one, I saw the highway patrolman, and he went by, and I turned and pulled into where I worked at the Golden Skillet, and I pulled in and parked and ran into the bathroom real quick. And he's real smart. It didn't fool him at all. Even though he was a few minutes behind me, I didn't fool him at all. And so when I finally decided to come out of the bathroom, he's standing there waiting on me, and he calls me outside and talks to me and then takes me downtown and breathed the breathalyzer. And sure enough, I got my first drunk driving ticket. And about 6 months later, I got my second one from another state patrolman, one of my parents' neighbors. That went over real good with the family. Brings a lot of family pride in on that one. So that put me without any kind of driving or anything at all. So all of my school went downhill from there. And one of the things I remember in Greenville, they talk about in the big book, those hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And I was downtown Greenville one night. We'd had a Saturday to where me and my buddies were really having a good time. We had went to the grocery store on our large budget we had, and beer, generic beer, was $1.65 a six-pack or something like that, or $1.50 a six-pack. So we went to the A&P store and we loaded up on as much as we had our budget to buy, and we filled our refrigerator up with these white cans with blue letters that just says beer. And we really enjoyed turning them all so they all said beer. So how you looked at it, it said beer, and we'd open the refrigerator. Back then, if we'd had technology like cell phones, there'd have been a lot of pictures going out about our beer and our party pad, So anyway, we tear into this beer, and it lasts to the early afternoon. Some guys are going to a football game, some guys are going here and there, and I'm left alone. Now, I know you're not supposed to drink alone because, see, that's one of those things that you're an alcoholic if you drink alone. But I had company when I started. They left. So there's no reason for me to stop, So I just kept drinking. And I decided I'm going downtown. I'm going to go play some foosball, Pantana Bob's. That's my favorite place to go. I'm going to go down there and play some foosball. So that's what I did. Got down there and I'm doing good. I'm winning. And the deal was, you put a quarter up. If you get to challenge the winner and you lose, you have to buy them a beer. But if you win, they got to buy you a beer. So I'm winning. I've got an old mantle up here, this closed up fireplace, this mantle behind this foosball table, and it's lined with my long neck Budweisers I've been enjoying off these other guys while I've been winning. And I finally got drunk enough to lose, and I'm pretty bad off now. I mean, I've been drinking all day. I jumped on this long neck Budweiser. I'm in pretty bad shape now. So I'm going outside to cool off. This is one of these things that happened to me. Now I'm going to describe this. You may or may not have had this phenomenon, but this was the thing that plagued me the later years of my drinking. I would begin to sweat profusely, and I mean thumb-sized drops of water coming off my head, and my tongue would swell, and my throat would feel like it was going to close off, and then my stomach would roll, and then we all know what happens next. And so I have to go outside and cool off is my term. So I'm inside this real hot bar with all these people, and I'm going outside to cool off. And I go outside to cool off, and I come to many hours later in the alley between the bar and the sandwich shop there. And when I first come to, there is a young couple, a very nice couple. God bless them. I mean, God looks out for drunks and children, And he would certainly look out for this old drunk that night. He sent those two angels to watch over me until I came to, because my shirt was gone, my shoes were gone, most of the stuff in my pockets were in the leaves in the alley with me. Fortunately, my pants were on, thank God. And this couple was just watching me like you might watch a wounded animal or something. They was afraid if I moved, they might have moved, And I come to, and I'm looking at them, and they're just mystified. They're almost frightened, as to what to think of how I got in that predicament, And the moment I see them, and I can tell that they're good people. They're not like me. They're good people. And the last thing I wanted was to be found by good people in the condition I was in. So I began to scramble and find my car keys and find my belongings and get everything I could and get it in my pockets and thank them graciously. And, no shirt, no shoes, just my pants. My shirt and shoes were gone to whoever they're running around with them now or wore them out. But I was just wanting to get to my car and get away, And I've never, ever felt more humiliated and more remorseful and just absolutely god-awful than I did leaving that alley, knowing that those people had found me in that condition. But today I'm extremely grateful that they did, because there's no telling what else might have happened had they not stayed with me until I came to and helped me to my car, offered to drive me home, but of course we're fine, I got this. And I drove home without incident somehow, and I can tell you that that's kind of how my drinking went. By the time I get to Alcoholics Anonymous in 1987, there were many more of those incidents, and I'll share one more with you. I had managed to get my license back. I had managed to secure a job with an electrical contractor in our area, and we were doing work at the paper mill there in Plymouth. We were doing work down at Nag's Head. Back then it was the new mall. That was the old mall, the Outer Banks Mall. And we were doing some work down at the Corps of Engineers down at Duck. And great summer job for a guy like me. But anyway, we were doing that, And I finally finished up that job, and I had re-met this little girl I went to high school with. We rode the school bus together in elementary, and we just hated each other. I was mean to her, and she was mean to me. And I walk into this little restaurant there on 64 called the Little Man, and I walk in there, and she's a waitress there. She's coming out of the back, going to the restroom and coming back, and I'm thought, man, who is that? You know, and then I see this guy come in that I know, and she's talking to him, and he comes out, and he explains to me that he's been dating her, and I'm like, man, if she'll date that guy, I'm a shoo-in, you know, our egos are, you know. So I immediately went to work on that angle, you know. I slid him right on out of the way. And we couldn't believe, we laughed because we said, you know, we hated each other, but there was an instant, I mean, opposites attract, I guess. But it's like we just hit it off. And we became really tight, really close, really fast. And she had to deal with some of my misadventures and all that. And so when my mother said, you know, if you could just get married and get away from these boys that you're running with, you're a good boy. You'll be all right if you can just get away from them knotheads you're running around with. You'll be okay. And I wanted to believe my mama. And I got an opportunity to leave Plymouth and go to Raleigh with that construction company. And I knew that my girlfriend, soon-to-be fiance, was working at Belk's, and that there's a good chance she could get a job at Belk's in Raleigh. So that was going to be a good move. That was a plan. So I came to Raleigh with everything in the back of my little 76 Mustang Cobra 2. And if y'all remember, they weren't real big cars, so you can't get a whole lot in them. So I didn't have a lot of worldly possessions. My grocery bag suitcases and my case of albums, that's for y'all know, that's the things you used to put on the turntable and put the needle on in vinyl. But I had a whole case of those and a stereo and the speakers and all the important things to a 21-year-old. And I take off to Raleigh, and when I get to Raleigh, it doesn't take me long working construction to find the people that think like I think and drink like I drink. And so it didn't take me long to run into some of the same problems there. And the problem came in when I didn't go home on the weekends to see my girlfriend. We had a long-distance relationship. Her mom was not going to let her move out until we got married, so we were dating a long distance. I would go home on the weekend and visit her. And so long story short was I didn't make it home every weekend because I wanted to go to these clubs and have a good time in Raleigh. Well, I had told her I had to work out of town. Now, I don't know about y'all. I'm going to tell you this about me. When you read how it works, and they talk about being constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself. There are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. Their chances are less than average. You're looking at a man that got sober on a less than average chance, because I'll promise you I was constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself or anyone. I would lie when the truth would suffice. It's just the way I was. And so I was lying to her about where I was and what I was doing. And it all came to a head one night when my roommate that came back from Charlotte didn't know this. He didn't know that I was on the lam about this thing. And so when she called, he said, yeah, he'll be home in a little while. I'll leave a message for him. She said, you do that. So I called and immediately felt the heat. And we got through this conversation. We came up with this deal. She said, I don't mind you drinking. I don't mind you having a good time. Just don't lie to me about it. So I was like, well, what can we do? She said, well, maybe you ought to see a psychiatrist and see if you can get some help about that lying. I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. But she hadn't said anything about stopping drinking. You know, we're going to stop lying but not stop drinking. I'm okay with stopping lying, just not stopping drinking. So I cook up this deal, and I find out from my buddies at work, you know how we get advice from the bartenders and our buddies at work. So they said, yeah, you can go over there, and they don't charge you much money. It's based on what you make. If you don't make much, you don't pay much. So we go over there, and I go to Wake County Mental Health Center. Now I'm thinking it's going to be something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, people picking stuff out of the air that's not there and blowing spit bubbles. And I have no idea. That's just my way my ego's going, and I just want to get in and get out before anybody sees me. Raleigh's a big city. Folks don't know me, but my ego's like, we want to get in and out. So I go in there, and I got to fill out these questionnaires. And it's all about drinking. And I'm like, man, what are they worried about the drinking for, you know? So I fill them out. Not honestly, but I fill them out. And so anyway, I do the best I can with it. And the little psychologist, this is the one gate you have to get through before you see the real doctor. And so she looks at it, and she starts talking to me. In just a few minutes, she said, hold on. She knew she wasn't going nowhere with me, so she put me right on into the psychiatrist. Well, see, my ego, I'm thinking, well, I'm so sharp, she's just going to move me right on in, I'm going to cut corners here. I was all about getting special treatment, so I get in to see the psychiatrist, and she's going through, and she says, Mr. Dotson, I see here that you drink and this and that. She said, Mr. Dotson, how much do you drink? And I said, a couple of beers every day. She said, a couple. And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, okay. And she snickered. I think she's heard that answer before. That was always my answer. It was a couple. It was a couple about 3 or 4 or 5 times, but it was a couple. And so the next thing she's going down and she's asking me these questions, and I'm answering them, and she said, okay, Mr. Dotson, she said, I tell you what. And she starts writing. I thought, I'm in. She's writing on that business card. I'm not going to have to come to this mental health center. I'm going to be in a private practice with her, and it's going to be away from here, and nobody will see me. This is exactly what I'm looking for. This will make the girlfriend happy. It'll make everybody happy. This is the deal I'm looking for, and I just can't wait. I'm just can't wait for that business card. And she's writing, and she takes some glasses off and all these big diplomas on the wall, and she leans forward with a big smile, and I take that card, and I'm looking, and it says Alcoholics Anonymous and a telephone number, and I'm looking at her, and my drug action of Wake County and the telephone number, and I'm looking at her, and I'm going, and I got this puzzled look, and she smiled. She said, Mr. Dotson, you call those numbers, and after you've been sober for a year, you come back and see me, and I think I can help you with that dishonesty problem you got. That chair almost melted below me where I was so mad. I mean, it's one thing if you throw your arm around me and hand me a fifth of Georgia Dick or White Label, say, here you old drunk, take a pull. That's much different than sitting behind them big degrees and that little smile and handing me that card telling me I'm an alcoholic. But I can tell you as I answered them questions, I know for certain and sure the only question I answered honestly on that form was I never drank while pregnant. That's the only one. All the rest of them is anybody's game, whatever I answered, I can tell you that. So what happened for me is that, I'm too young and hip, slick, and cool to go to AA, so I think I need to go to the other 12-step fellowship. And so this is 1985, and so I go to the other 12-step fellowship, and it's a great program. It helps a lot of people. For a drunk like me, I'm just not well suited for it, but I gave it a try. And I got into the social stuff, and I was going to meetings, and I was going bowling, and I was fellowshipping, and I was having a great time. I learned all the slogans. I could read out work. I was having a good time. I'd go home and tell my girlfriend how good everything was going, and then one night I heard in a meeting that you couldn't make any major decisions in the first year of recovery. Well, we were getting ready to get married in September, so I went back and told her, I said, honey, we got to put that wedding off. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, they told me I couldn't make any major decisions in the first year, so we got to put that thing out of here. She said, I don't think you need to go to them meetings anymore. I said, I don't either, darling. About the next year and a half, I like to kill myself. What brought me in the door, my scorecard read 0, was a felony possession with intent to distribute. So they didn't like my materials management and distribution practices I had going on. My wife was ready to leave. My boss was ready to fire me. I had nothing left, nowhere else to go. And I finally surrendered, and I walked into a little meeting called Surrender to Win of that other fellowship on a Saturday night. And I knew that I had only been able to stay sober about 30 days, and we got in a car wreck. I was sober. I wrecked many a car drunk, more than I got time to go into here. But this one was sober, and it wasn't even my fault, so I was good and mad. Many people say, boy, that's funny how we get mad when it's always on our foot. But anyway, what happened is that I went that Wednesday night. I came home from work restless, irritable, and discontent, just like Silkworth described. And the only thing I could get sense of ease and comfort was I had to get a beer, and I did. And I got home, and my wife was on the couch, her little foot was bummed up, and she saw me pacing the floor because I was pacing with that beer, because all I could think about was getting more beer, loading that truck up, backing at the edge of the field like us country boys do, and that was going to get it on. If I'm going to pick up another white chip, it ain't going to be on a half can of beer, I'll assure you that. I was going to get good and drunk. And she looked at me and she said, honey, why don't you pour the rest of it out and go to a meeting tonight? And it was just like that V8 thing, I was just like, that was amazing. I could not, with everything in me, I could not produce that thought. And that thought came clear, and I guess it was God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I walked to the sink and I poured out that beer. That's the first time I ever poured out a good beer, I can tell you that. There was a cigarette butt floating in it if I poured it out. I didn't pour out good beer. I poured it in, I didn't pour it out. And I went to a meeting that night, and I went to a meeting Thursday night, and I went to a meeting Friday night, and here comes Saturday, and I have not told anybody I drank, and I have not picked up a white chip. And I walked in that meeting, and the first thing they asked for if anybody had a problem staying away from a drink that day, and I said, yeah, I raised my hand, and I told them what was going on. And a man came up to me after the meeting, and he told me he understood. And he told me a few things, and he asked me a few questions, and he said, do you have a sponsor? And I said, no. And he said, do you want one? And I said, yes. He said, are you willing to go to any length to stay sober? Never had anybody ask me that question before. And I said, yes. And he said, well, you got yourself a sponsor. The following Tuesday night, that was a Saturday night, the following Tuesday night, he took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock at the Crabtree Group in Raleigh, North Carolina. That was my very first home group. When I walked in that room, I thought I was in a church meeting. Like everybody looking here tonight, we all look good. I expected what an AA meeting to look like was a bunch of old folks with raincoats, trench coats, flare bags, and all this stuff. Our mind, And when I walked in there, all these people looked really good. I thought I was in the wrong meeting. And my sponsor told me it's okay. He felt the same way. We went in, and I met people that took the time to get to know me. Now, when I got here, I didn't look like I look tonight. I was 25 years old. I was skinny. I mean, I look malnourished. If you lived like I was living, you'd have been malnourished. But I was living on alcohol a little less. But I kind of looked like Redbeard the pirate when I first got here. I was amazed they wanted to sit beside me. Most people would move. And this one old lady, she grabbed me one night. I was a 9 o'clocker. I know y'all probably got one here. At 9 o'clock, that door, I'm gone. Boom. And I was on my normal poised position over by the literature table. So just as soon as I could get out that door without getting caught, I was gone. And I hit that door, and she grabbed me by the arm. And I about pulled that poor old lady halfway down the hall because I was going to get a cigarette. And she said, hold on a minute. She said, how's your day? Fine. And what do you want from the thing? And she said, well, tell me. Well, let's go out here and get a cigarette. Come on, we'll go smoke a cigarette. And what that woman did for me, and her name was Marie Rich. She passed away many years ago with 22 years of sobriety. But she was the first one in that home group, other than my sponsor, that reached out and took a chance at getting to know me and let me get to know her. And she had a little step study that they had started on that Wednesday night for people in our home group that wanted to study the 12 steps. And they spoon-fed me the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I truly think that's what made the difference between success and failure for me. And they integrated me into that home group. I was the official chair setter-upper, coffee pot cleaner, ashtrays. We smoked in meetings. We had ashtrays, and you had to put them all out, and you had to take them all up and dump them and wash them and stack them in the kitchen. And my sponsor thinks that we need to get some of them, dirty them up just for the newcomers to clean them now. That's what half wrong with half of them. But we would get all that stuff, and it made me feel a part of. It really made me feel a part of. And I had not felt a part of anything for a really long time other than a lot of problems. And I can tell you is that what happened for me was throughout the years of my sobriety, the first time that I was about 3 months sober, and I had a overwhelming obsession and compulsion to drink come over me like I'd never experienced before. And it was one of those days I come home, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. I got a hole in my chest, the wind's blowing through, and I can't fill it with anything. It's a God-sized hole, and the only thing you're going to fill is God. And I wanted to drink more than I wanted to breathe. And I mean, the hair on my head wanted to drink a liquor. I could taste the bourbon, I could smell it. I just wanted to drink a liquor, make it all go away. And I remembered this stupid little saying, the time to call your sponsors before you drink, not after. And it was real prevalent back then in that time, almost more than don't drink and go to meetings is today. But I remember that thing rattling around. I said, fine, I'll call him. I went and called him. I knew he wasn't going to be home. He was never home. That joker picks up on the first ring. And he asked me to come over to his house, and then he asked me a really important question. He said, there's 2 convenience stores between my house and yours. Can you go past them and not get something to drink? And I said, yes. And I went to his house, and what happened next was as he sat down, and this isn't fair when this happens to you, but I'm grateful that he did. He sat down, and he took my near-death experiences. He took all the wrecked cars, all the embarrassing situations. He took all that stuff to completely snuff out any chance that I thought I might not be an alcoholic. I fully conceded to my innermost self that day in his living room that I was an alcoholic. I was powerless over alcohol, that my life was unmanageable. And he asked me where I stood with God. And I said, well, I believe in God, but I just don't think he believes much in me. And he got his head. He's like, man, how can you believe that? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, did you hear what we just went through? He said, you had totally lost vehicles. That means there's no repairing that car. You come out without a scratch. You go through 2 or 3 near-death experiences where God puts people in the right place at the right time to pull you from harm's way so you can survive. And you don't think God's involved in your life. And I was just like, I never thought about it like that. And right then at that moment, I began to understand. I came to believe there at that moment that God had been a part of my life all along, and I just didn't know it. I wouldn't acknowledge it. I just didn't know. And the next thing he did was take my hand, which I didn't think much of now. I'll shake a man's hand, look you in the eye, and I'll shake it firm. But I'm not a holding hands kind of guy with guys, you know. And he was trying to hold my hands and take me down to do a prayer, and I didn't know what he was doing, and I'm pulling back, and he looked at me, and he said, did you mean it or not? I said, what do you mean? He said, when you told me you were willing to go to any length to stay sober, he said, did you mean it or not? I said, I meant it. He said, well, then pray with me. And we got down on our knees, and we prayed a prayer. I didn't know what it was then. Today I know it was a 3rd-step prayer. All I can tell you is that all the confusion and all the just God-awful wanting to take a drink more than I wanted to breathe, all that stuff in a few moments when I left his house and started home was gone. It left me that day right then and there, and it's never returned since. And our big book talks about when we take that 3rd step, if we take it on our knees and we take it and we voice it without reservation, that we can have an experience, sometimes a great one, can happen to us. And that's what happened to me. And that was the experience that removed the obsession and compulsion to drink, that today I truly believe is why I'm sober today. I followed that up with action by going home and beginning my fourth step. I got with that sponsor and I took a 5th step. And I was scared to death. I didn't even write 3 of those dirty, rotten things down because I didn't want anybody to find it and read it. I just didn't want anybody to know. I was going to take them to the grave. And I get in my sponsor's truck and we're riding out to the lake, this place at the lake. And he says, I want you to tell me the worst thing you got, the one you didn't even bother to write down. I'm like, y'all learn this stuff in sponsor school or something? You know, how do you know to ask the right questions? How do you know that? And so I rode along for a minute. I got my courage up and I dumped the worst one on him. He said, give me the worst one. The other one would come easy. So I gave him the worst one and he got quiet. And I said, man, I should have warmed him up. And he pulls over in his gas station. He still hadn't said anything. And he looks across that truck and he's pumping gas. And I'm looking at him, waiting for a response. And he says, you know, that's pretty common. I said, well, I'm walking home now for sure, you know. And he said, no, what I mean by that, he said, let me go pay for the gas. He said, I'll be back. Hop in the truck. So he comes back and he shares an experience almost identical to what I had been carrying, that guilt and that shame for years. I've been drinking for years to hide that stuff, to push it as far back as I could, hoping to never see the light of day. And he shares one very similar to it. And it opened up that language of the heart for me. And for the first time, I was 25 years old, I was completely honest with another human being for the first time about everything. I withheld nothing. At that point, I just opened the gates and let him have it. And I can tell you is that over the years of my sobriety, that moment, that amount of humility and that amount of willingness, I was never more willing to let go of those defects of character as I was at that moment. I was never more willing to go out and make amends. And I went to my poor in-laws, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, to apologize to them. I was told I couldn't say I was sorry anymore, and I couldn't use I love you anymore. That those were no longer mine to use to manipulate people and to get out of trouble. That I had to say I apologize, and God willing it shall not be repeated. And I went to my wife and to my mom and my dad and everybody in our family and at work, and I made those direct amends. And I'm coming up on about a year now, and all that happened in my first year, well within my first 9 months of sobriety. And I can tell you, I'm extremely grateful that he did that. The next sponsors that I had from that point on, my wife and I, we did end up separating and divorcing, but I was 7 years sober when that happened. It was many years later. We built a nice house, and we just grew apart. I mean, I was going back to school, my work. I got another job, a better job, and they sent me back to school to take engineering courses. And that's where I met my wife today, and just my life was going in a different direction than hers, and she just wanted out, and I said, that's fine. We made an amicable split. It hurt like the Dickens, and we made a split, and I can tell you is that was the time I found my home group. It was in 1994, and I had a couple of guys I was sponsoring, and I met the man that was to become my next sponsor, Mike C, and he sponsored me for 9 years, and then in 2000, Samantha and I got married in 2000, and we started trying to have kids right away, and we got lucky. We had pregnant right out the gate, as you would say, and we were so excited, and everybody was excited in the family, and several months into the pregnancy, she had a miscarriage. She lost it. Something was wrong with the fetus, and so it was like getting punched in the stomach by me. It was just like knocking the wind out of me spiritually, and I struggled. I mean, I'm a guy that I'm going to meetings, I'm going to home group every time the doors open, I'm sponsoring people, I'm in service work, I'm doing everything I know to do in AA the right way to do it, the best way I know how to do it. I'm doing the best I can. And the best thing I can get from my higher power is he's going to take my first child. You know, that's kind of where my mind went. That's how self-centered I was over this whole thing, and full of self-pity and just struggling. And I approached a buddy of mine, Jerry, in my home group, and I said, and he knew I was struggling. And I approached him one night. I was over at a friend of ours, Paige's group in Rocky Mount, over at Came to Believe, and I was giving a talk, and after the talk, I had one of those come to Jesus moments at the podium, and I went to Jerry after the meeting, and I asked him if he would take me through the big book like he had my friend Todd, and I saw what a magnificent change it had in Todd's personality, and he said he would. And so at 5:30 in the morning, every morning for the next several months, that man took me from the very front of the big book through Bill Dotson's story, AA number 3. And then every morning after that, and we worked through steps. As we got to the prayers, we prayed them. As we got to the steps, we worked them. And then he took me through the traditions and through the service manual. And I've never had anybody that loved the history of AA as much as I do and want to learn and thirst for it and the knowledge and the experience of that. But I can tell you is what I got from that man was that he gave me the best sponsoring that I think I'd ever had from anybody. And I had good sponsors. Now, nothing wrong. Every sponsor I had was great. They did exactly what they were supposed to do for me at the time that they were sponsoring me. But I really needed something powerful at this time, and that's what I got. And what he explained to me was we were going to work this thing just like the first 100 did. And if you look at their success rates, they're pretty impressive. And we went through that book, and we followed everything right through the book. And I wrote that 4th step and the resentments and all the questions and the fears and all the questions and the sex conduct. And then he had me do conduct over the years past with my family, with my work, and with my community, even my AA home group. And when I went through and did a 9th step with all these people and went back to work and made amends to those people, I was so resentful and so sure they were out to get me. Just those conspiracy theories and stuff, just full of fear, full of craziness. And when I was able to get through the other side of that, I could see the difference in not me, but in the reaction of these people around me towards me. They no longer were concerned about what I was going to say or how I was going to behave. They were warm and welcome and cordial. And they showed me love and kindness, the things I should have been showing them all along, but I just didn't know how because of all the stuff going on in my head. But when I made amends, I was free of that stuff. And I hadn't been that free in a very long time. And that was such a powerful experience for me. I took the guys I sponsored through that same process. And that's how I sponsor guys today. And I know my good friend Richard Page, that was a former group member here, and he was a past GSR of my home group, and I loved him dearly, and I don't mind saying his full name in the meeting. I hope nobody's offended by that, because I just loved the man. I thought he was a great guy, and he was a brother of mine. We had the same sponsor, and I know he sponsored the way that Jerry sponsored he and I, and I can tell you that he loved this group. My God, he loved this group. He loved each one of you. I'm going to close with this, is that if you are sitting here tonight and you don't have a home group and you don't have a sponsor, those were the two things I hope you picked up out of my talk that made the difference, was that I had a home group and I had a sponsor. Otherwise, I would have drank that day I wanted to drink more than I wanted to breathe. I'll guarantee you, because that's what I always did before. So if you don't have a home group and you don't have a sponsor, I suggest you get one. And thank you so much for letting me come and share with you tonight.